Hi students, today let us focus on the third module of your subject. It is based on syntax. Let me ask you something at the outset. What do you mean by syntax? Syntax refers to the grammatical structure of sentences in a language. The format or the pattern in which the words are combined together to form phrases and how they combine together to form the next higher units in a language. So the word syntax comes from a Greek word syntaxis, which means coordination. It has two component parts: syn, S-Y-N, syn, which means together, and taxis, which means an ordering. So you may get confused between syntax and diction. Is syntax all about words in a sentence? Then what is diction? So diction is a popular word which is used with reference to the choice of words that a speaker uses. The choice of words is diction. And syntax is not just the choice of words, it refers to the pattern or ordering or arrangement of the structural elements in a sentence. How these words, how these structural elements are arranged to form a grammatical sentence. This is what you learn in syntax. So to analyze the difference between syntax and diction, I'll just give you 3 sentences. Sentence number 1. The boy jumped happily. The boy happily jumped. Second sentence. And the third sentence, happily the boy jumped. In all these 3 sentences, you found the same words. Diction is basically the same, but the arrangement of the words is different. And this is what you mean by syntax. And let us now see the 3 different types of syntax. 1. Simple sentences. It normally follows the order subject and verb. For example, the boy jumped. The boy is the subject and jumped is the verb. Subject is followed by the verb. This is an example of a sentence, a simple sentence. It has a particular syntax. And the second category, compound sentences. It may have 2 subjects or even 2 verbs. For example, take the sentence, the boy jumped and the girl sang. Here you have 2 subjects, right? The boy and the girl. Then 2 actions are also mentioned here, jump and sang, right? So this compound sentence has a different type of syntax. And now let's examine a third type of syntax as found in complex sentences. A complex sentence is one which involves a subordinated clause. For example, take the sentence, the boy jumped even though he was nervous. The boy jumped, that forms the main clause, even though he was nervous, right? It has a subordinating clause. So there are different ways of arranging the structural elements in a sentence. In order to get a grammatical sentence, you can arrange the words, you can pattern or order them in different ways. So this is called syntax. And an analysis of the structure of a grammatic sentence is called syntactic analysis. There are different types of syntactic analysis. We call them syntactic model. Syntactic model. If you try to examine the structure of a sentence, of course there are so many methodologies. We call them syntactic model of analyzing the structure. There are 3 important syntactic models. 1. Immediate constituent analysis. 2. Phrase structure grammar. 3. transformational generative grammar. I repeat, there are three popular syntactic models. 1. Immediate constituent analysis. 2. Phrase structure grammar. And 3. Transformational generative grammar. You just need to know that syntax means the structure or the arrangement of words and phrases to form grammatic sentences, and the structure can be analyzed. We call such syntactic analysis syntactic models, and there are three types of syntactic models. We will go to that area in detail later. And now we are supposed to learn a few concepts, dual concepts. It's easy to learn them. So before moving into that, let me ask you something. Who's the father of linguistics? Yeah, it is the Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure. Ferdinand de Saussure. So he has written a very famous text titled Course in General Linguistics. It got published in the year 1916. So Ferdinand de Saussure is the father of modern linguistics, and the very important text that he wrote is Course in General Linguistics. It got published in the year 1916. So now let us move on to the concepts. As I told you, dual concepts. Let me begin with sign and the components signifier and signified. Signifier is the sound and signified is the meaning. In the initial class itself, we have dealt with this concept. Signifier is the written, the graphic or the phonic word that you use, and the concept denoted or the meaning or the idea behind it is the signified. And the relationship between a signifier and a signified is only an arbitrary one. Take the word cat. When I say cat, my phonic utterance cat, it's a signifier. It's a phonic signifier. And when I write down the word C-A-T, cat, it's a graphic or a written signifier. And both the phonic signifier and the graphic signifier refers to a concept or refers to the signified, that is the pet animal, that animal which mews, right? Okay. But is there any inseparable connection between this word and that animal? Not actually. So we have been using the word cat to refer to that particular animal, and everybody has agreed upon the fact that cat is that pet animal which loves to drink milk, and it goes on like that. It can change any time. Okay, so the relationship between a signifier and a signified is only an arbitrary one, and signifier and signified are the two components of a word or a sign. I told you in linguistics every word is a sign. Okay, and it's Ferdinand de Saussure who came up with the concept of sign and its components signifier and signified. And then another dual concept which you should know is langue and parole. Langue and parole. So langue is a word, a French word, which means language. Langue is a French word which means language, and parole means speaking. So what does this mean, langue and parole? Again, it is Saussure who introduced langue and parole. L-A-N-G-U-E, langue, which means language, and parole, P-A-R-O-L-E. Langue refers to that big language system, that abstract language system of all the rules regarding a language. It is something which lies embedded in our consciousness. So in order to speak a language, in order to understand a language, in order to produce and understand a language, you should have this language system in you, which is called langue. But in our day-to-day conversations, we are not using the entire stuff that is there in your language system. We utter only a handful of words or only limited number of words a day. So all those utterances that you make in your everyday conversations are actually the manifestations or the external manifestations of the inbuilt lang that you have in you. Okay, parole is the external manifestation of the lang that you possess. Every speaker, every native speaker of a language has this lang in him. It's a set of internalized rules and principles. Okay, and we are not using the entire knowledge about a language every day. We use only limited number of words in our day-to-day conversations, and all those external utterances that you let out, they are known as parole. Parole refers to the external utterances or the manifestation that you give. It can be either a written manifestation or an oral, a spoken manifestation. Okay, lang refers to the language system and parole refers to the external utterances. Is that clear to you? Yes. Okay, now we learned lang and parole by Ferdinand de Saussure. Now you should learn two similar concepts: competence and performance, or linguistic competence and linguistic performance. This is in sheer correspondence to the concepts of lang and parole. But there is a difference. It is the linguist named Noam Chomsky who introduced the concepts competence and performance. N-O-A-M, Noam Chomsky, C-H-O-M-S-K-Y. Noam Chomsky is the linguist who proposed the terms linguistic competence and linguistic performance. This is parallel to the concepts lang and parole. So competence refers to the ability of a speaker, a native speaker's ability to produce and understand a language. For example, if you know English, if you have mastered English, so you know a lot many things about English, a lot many rules and regulations about the use of English, right? But you are not using it all every day. And performance refers to the actual usage of your language. You know a lot of things, and with that as a foundation, with that as a basis, you use language according to your need, according to your day-to-day requirement. So the actual use of a language is called performance. And the knowledge that you have, the set of rules that are internalized as part of the language acquisition, it is called linguistic competence. How competent you are, how far you are able to produce and understand a language, your competence level. That is of course a large fund with you, but you are not spending that big fund every day, right? You make use of a little bit of it every day as per the demands of the various contexts. So the actual usages is called your performance or linguistic performance, and the large fund of knowledge about the internalized rules of a language, we call it the linguistic competence. So don't forget Ferdinand de Saussure, his concepts: sign, signify, then coming to lang and parole, and then another linguist Noam Chomsky, his concepts linguistic competence and linguistic performance, which is parallel to lang and parole. I hope that's clear to you. And now I'm moving on to two other terms: grammaticality and acceptability. We started our discussion with the word syntax, right? With the word grammar. Yeah, the pattern or the format of arranging words and phrases to form a grammatical sentence. This is called syntax. So basically we are dealing with grammar. So now we are going to learn two terms: grammaticality and acceptability. What do you mean by grammatical sentence? If the linguistic units in a sentence are strictly following all the rules of the grammar of that language, we call it a grammatical sentence. A grammatical sentence is one in which all the structural elements in a sentence are strictly following the rules of that particular language's grammar. So this is a grammatical sentence. That is the correct sentence. And now let's take acceptability. So how do we define or how do we determine whether a sentence is acceptable or what? In order to be acceptable, a sentence should be grammatical first. In order to be acceptable for the speaker and the listener and the whole context, the sentence has to be grammatical. And it should be permissible for the speaker and the listener. It should be permissible. It shouldn't offend anybody. It should make some sense, right? So in order to make the concepts of grammaticality and acceptability, I shall give you an example. It's an example of Noam Chomsky, okay? Take the sentence. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. If you have a notepad with you, you can write it down and see what it means. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. If you observe that sentence, it's grammatical. It sounds or it seems to be grammatical. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. But this sentence is not at all acceptable because something cannot be at the same time colorless and green. Something cannot be at the same time colorless and green. And something cannot sleep furiously. Right? So the sentence is an illogical one. So it's not acceptable. Right? It sounds grammatical according to the rule, according to the the grammatical construction and all. If you just observe it, it sounds okay, but it is not sensible at all. It's an illogical sentence, so it's not acceptable, right? So if you want a sentence to be acceptable, basically it should be grammatical and it should be permissible for the speaker and the listener. Okay, grammaticality means whether a sentence strictly follows all the rules of grammar as prescribed by a particular language. Take another sentence. The world in which we live in is safe. The world in which we live in is safe. This sentence is not grammatical. You know why? The preposition in is unnecessarily repeated. The world in which we live is safe. That was enough. Instead of that, somebody is saying the world in which we live in is safe. The preposition in got unnecessarily repeated and therefore the sentence is not grammatical. So I hope the idea of grammaticality and acceptability is clear to you by now. Now we shall learn two more concepts: descriptive grammar and prescriptive grammar. I think this you have learned in your third semester methodology of teaching English paper. Anyhow, we are brushing it up. What do you mean by descriptive grammar? Descriptive grammar is a systematic study of, a systematic description of the nature of a language. Okay, what they do is they observe language as it is actually used by the speakers and then they analyze it and formulate a theory regarding it. So this is what you mean by descriptive grammar. And prescriptive grammar, this is the traditional grammar. They lay out rules regarding grammar, like the correct use of grammar, the incorrect use of grammar, and so on. So this is the difference between descriptive grammar and prescriptive grammar. Descriptive means they focus on the actual usage of language, then they describe it, analyze it and formulate a rule regarding the language and grammar. Whereas prescriptive grammarians prescribe the rules of correct usage and incorrect usage. Okay? And similarly, we have synchronic grammar and diachronic grammar. synchronic study of the grammar of a language and diachronic study of the grammar of a language. Synchronic means, studying how a language was at a particular point of time in history, or studying how a language is at a particular point in history. For example, studying American English at the early phase of 21st century. You study all about the language at that particular period in history. This is what I mean by synchronic study of the grammar of a language. And now we have diachronic study of the grammar of a language. That means you study about the origin, the development, the changes and the modifications and all those gradual changes that happen to the language in course of time. So diachronic means across history. So diachronic study of grammar is also known as historical study of grammar. And the other one, synchronic study, it is quite descriptive in its nature, describing how a language used to be or how a language is at a particular point in history. So we have discussed descriptive grammar and prescriptive grammar. We came across synchronic study of grammar and diachronic study of grammar. Then we will learn one more dual concept today. With that we will end the session. It is two types of relationships that exist between the elements in a sentence. So what are the elements in a sentence? Of course, words. We can also call these words linguistic units. Each word is a linguistic unit. So if you take one sentence and if you have a look at that sentence, and you write English from left to right, right? So you just take a close look from left side to right side. Yeah, the sentence has got a linear, horizontal arrangement, right? And it is composed of so many words. It's composed of so many linguistic units. And all of us know that these linguistic units that you find in the linear fashion in a sentence are related to each other. So this linear arrangement of the linguistic units in a sentence, it has a relationship. And that relationship is called syntagmatic relationship. And we call it a syntagm. S-Y-N-T-A-G-M. For example, the cat sat on the mat. The cat sat on the mat. So there is of course a relationship between the cat sat on the mat. All these are small linguistic units which are connected to each other in one way or another. So it's a sort of a relationship, a linear relationship that exists between the linguistic units in that sentence. We call such relationship syntagmatic relationship. And we do have yet another kind of relationship, that is below that sentence, the cat sat on the mat. You can write a cluster of other sentences like the dog crawled across the mat, she sat beneath the mat, or whatever. So when you write down such a cluster of sentences one below the other, you get a kind of vertical relationship between linguistic units. See, each of those words can be substituted in the first sentence given. Like instead of the cat, you can write the dog. Instead of on the mat, you can write across the mat. So there is a sort of relationship between the first sentence and whatever is given vertically beneath it. So that vertical kind of arrangement of linguistic units of course creates a relationship. They do share a relationship. The vertical arrangement of linguistic units, they do form a relationship. So this is called paradigmatic relationship or paradigms. We call it a paradigm. So these are the two important relationships that exist among linguistic units. Okay. So today we have discussed so many dual concepts. So I discussed them all together because they are all dual concepts. We started the session by defining what syntax is. We learned the difference between syntax and diction. We learned three types of syntax: simple sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences, and so on. Then we came across Ferdinand de Saussure, the father of modern linguistics. His book Course in General Linguistics, published in 1916. His concepts Lang and Parole. Then we learned about Noam Chomsky and his important text is syntactic structures. Okay, the important textbook written by Noam Chomsky is Syntactic Structures. And what did he propose? Two important concepts, namely linguistic competence and linguistic performance. This is parallel to the concept of Lang and Parrot. And then we learned signifier and signified both constitute a word or a sign as proposed by Saussure. And then we learned grammaticality, acceptability, descriptive grammar, prescriptive grammar, synchronic approach to the grammar of a language, diachronic approach to the grammar of a language, then two types of relationships in sentences, syntagmatic relationships, paradigmatic relationships, and so on. So many dual concepts are there. I hope you will refer the textbook, underline the key points, and memorize them all. Thank you.